Well, I feel like this is a film that's important to be made because just as an actor, I'm not often given the opportunity to tell the story of a woman that really experiences the entire spectrum of female experience or any human experience, you know?
Yeah. I know Blake also talked about not wanting to play Lily like a delicate flower. So how were you able to incorporate that into the writing?
Well, there were a lot of conversations early on before we cast. Honestly, before we even were at Sony, it was supposed to be a really small indie movie at Wayfair, and then Sony got involved later. Blake got cast, and it snowballed from there.
Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. So, Blake Lively has either completely lost control of the narrative, or she's just getting absolutely dunked on lately. I mean, Jed Wallace basically dunked on her a couple of weeks ago when he dropped that declaration. In it, he claimed he did nothing, literally nothing. No posts, no directing anyone to post, no liking or commenting, and no telling others to like or comment either. He just read what was unfolding online and kept his team, Melissa and Nathan, in the loop. According to Jed, what he saw was a naturally forming backlash against Blake, and his advice was to sit back, not interfere, and just let it play out. He insists there was no need for them to get involved because, from his perspective, it was all happening organically. But Blake believes otherwise. She thinks Jed had a much bigger role in everything, and she made that clear in her response to his motion to dismiss. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Her response has this pretty obvious hole that she doesn't address at all. And sure, she technically doesn't have to. After all, she's responding to his attempt to dismiss her complaint, and she's operating under the assumption that her version of events is the truth. But we know that legal complaints only reflect one side of the story. And when you look at the messages and comments she references from Jen Abel and Melissa Nathan, they only show tiny fragments of what's really going on. It's like cherry-picking the worst line from someone's text thread and using it completely out of context to prove a point. But we've seen those full conversations now, between Melissa and Sarah, and between Melissa, Nathan, and Jen Abel. And they're not planting anything. They were clearly reacting to Leslie Sloan allegedly planting that Daily Mail story, Blake. Popping off at the premiere about Ryan writing the rooftop scene, and the chatter online about how Blake unfollowed Justin, how Justin didn't walk the carpet with everyone, and how Justin wasn't even at the premiere. That's what was actually going down. And then everyone started reacting to how she was promoting the film, while also marketing her alcohol brand and her hair care line. Blake just can't seem to accept that this is the real reason things spiraled. She keeps reaching for someone else to blame, and honestly, that's just my opinion. Even if you remove anything that may have happened on set, take all of that out of the equation. If Blake had simply acknowledged the domestic violence survivors on the red carpet, skipped promoting her products, and kept the focus on the film, and its deeper context, this entire situation might have gone in a completely different direction. But instead, she doubled down and pointed fingers at Jed Wallace again. And her response to his motion to dismiss, it doesn't even feel like a response to his actual filing. Jed was asking for dismissal based on lack of jurisdiction, improper venue, and the argument that he didn't defame her or play a part in any of this backlash. Instead of truly answering those points, Blake used her filing to once again retell her version of events, basically trying to rewrite the whole narrative from scratch. And here's the part that really caught my attention. She writes, through TAG, defendants engaged Mr. Wallace and Street Relations in early August 2024, just as press and public started noticing that none of Baldwin's co-stars would be seen with him. That date, August 6th, is also the film's premiere. She claims Jed and his team got to work immediately, manipulating and pushing negative content across social platforms like Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram. But here's where her version starts to crack. Miss Abel allegedly emailed Miss Nathan, and Jed on August 8th saying, this is something you can bring them up to speed on so they can hit the ground running. But what Blake conveniently leaves out is that most of the backlash against her actually started in Colleen Hoover's Facebook group, where her own fans were questioning her behavior. Like, they were literally asking, what the flying F are you doing, Blake? That Facebook group has over 200,000 members, and she just ignores it. Why? Probably because she knows she can't explain it away. She can't control that narrative. And then, on August 9th, a flurry of text messages starts between Miss Abel, Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Heath, Miss Nathan, and others from TAG. They're celebrating the shift in online discourse, now pointing blame at Ryan for being overly involved. One tag employee noted they'd flagged this to Jed and his team. That same day, Miss Abel even shared a screenshot of another post accusing Mr. Baldon of further misconduct. She apparently told Mr. Wallace to act on it, stating, "I'm assuming this isn't true in the slightest. Either way, we flagged Jed and his team for more serious action on the social side." That same day, Miss Nathan updated the group saying Mr. Wallace sent the message, "We're crushing it on Reddit." Around that time, Reddit threads began popping up speculating about a possible feud between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. But here's the thing. The media was already buzzing with talk of tension between them well before that. This wasn't new or Reddit exclusive. And you know what else happened on August 9th? Blake literally told the press that Ryan Reynolds wrote the rooftop scene. That's right. She said her husband wrote a major part of It Ends With Us, a scene the screenwriter Christy Hall had no idea about. Headlines on August 9th were screaming, "Blake Lively says Ryan Reynolds wrote rooftop scene from It Ends With Us," which caused a total stir. So the chatter that started online that day wasn't some behind-the-scenes manipulation. It was a direct reaction to what she herself said on the red carpet. She told Entertainment Tonight that Ryan wrote the scene, dragging him into the center of the story. Naturally, people began asking, why was Ryan, who wasn't the screenwriter, writing scenes for a movie that already had a script? The attention shifted because Blake opened that door, not because someone like Jed Wallace orchestrated it. This even prompted Sony to email Wayfarer saying, "Wait, what? We don't have him under contract. Was he actually writing? If so, we need paperwork. SAP." And Christy Hall suddenly had to deal with a wave of press questions over Blake's statement. When confronted, Christy confirmed she'd only seen minor changes to her original script, but still, Blake's comment put her in a tight spot. Without Blake bringing Ryan into the mix, no one would have even thought to question his involvement. This wasn't some master plan by Jed Wallace. This was Blake handing everyone the match and then acting shocked when the fire started. But in her filing, she skips over all of that. She never acknowledges that she sparked this entire conversation. She wants to paint it as Jed shifting the narrative against her via Reddit, when really, her own words were the catalyst that lit everything up. The feud was already happening online, and the narrative about it had been building for almost a week. So why is there such a focus on August 9th? It's because Blake brought Ryan into the conversation, and that's when he started getting dragged. Blake had already been facing backlash well before Jed Wallace entered the picture. We know that Ryan was the one telling WME executives that Justin Baldoni shouldn't attend the premiere. Ryan was the one turning the cast against Justin, spreading the rumor that he was a sexual predator. The moment Ryan's name was mentioned, all the attention shifted to him, but it was Blake who brought him up. Instead of owning up to her role in bringing him into the mix, she chooses to blame Jed Wallace for this so-called untraceable smear campaign. Then, on August 10th, Blake's team claimed that Jed and his efforts were successful in shifting the public narrative away from Justin and instead focusing on Blake and Ryan. But here's the thing. Blake was the one who, on August 9th, told the press that Ryan wrote the rooftop scene. Miss Nathan even said, "The majority of socials are so pro-Justin that I don't even agree with half of them." She later went on to brag about how genius the strategy had been. In the days that followed, Jed Wallace and his team continued to work alongside Miss Nathan, Miss Ale, and Tag, pushing forward with their strategy to manipulate the narrative. When a new allegation surfaced about Justin allegedly inviting a woman to his hotel room years ago, Miss Ale suggested speaking with Jed about it. But through all of this, Blake is not addressing any of Jed's claims. Instead, she's just rehashing her complaint. Her response starts on page 10 and continues all the way to page 25. However, a good chunk of those pages, about 7 or 8, are just a retelling of the story. She's not tackling Jed's motion to dismiss, just reiterating her own version of events. This feels more like an attempt to relive the complaint than to deal with the legal issues at hand. If you remember, the motion to dismiss from Wayfair for Reynolds was similar in nature, focusing on the bigger picture without responding directly to Jed's points. If you've been following this saga, you'll know this did not happen the way Blake is portraying it. This wasn't the right moment to rehash all the details. If you pay attention, she practically revealed her own frustration when she mentioned the shift in public attention from the stories about Justin Baldoni's alleged misconduct to a manufactured and harmful narrative about her. She acknowledged they noticed the shift on social media. But wait, are we talking about the stories that Leslie Sloan planted, the smear campaign being fueled by her publicist and Ryan Reynolds? They got upset when it shifted back on them, But this shift happened naturally because Blake opened her mouth and acted poorly while promoting the film. If you want to understand what actually went down, the truth lies in the text messages that Justin Baldoni has shared. They're included in the timeline of relevant events, which also features an email from Sony asking them to clarify Blake's statements. There's even an email from Jamie suggesting that maybe they should rethink how they're marketing this. If Jamie was really after Blake, why would he go through the effort of suggesting changes? It just doesn't add up. Now, let's take a look at the headlines from August 9th when Blake claims everything turned against her. Spoiler alert, it didn't happen on the 9th. Here's a few headlines. It ends with a screenwriter reacts. After Blake Lively says Ryan Reynolds rewrote scene, Justin Baldoni talks working with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Will they collaborate again? And screenwriter reacts to Blake Lively, saying Ryan Reynolds wrote a scene in their film. These were not negative stories. There were also headlines like, Ryan Reynolds got the last word in on Chris Evans and Deadpool, and Blake. Lively says Ryan Reynolds secretly wrote It Ends With Us scene amid rumored drama. A lip-reader recently shared what Ryan Reynolds reportedly said to Blake Lively during their tense conversation on the red carpet. And it's clear that their egos are becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan Reynolds, known for his control freak tendencies, seems to think it's always his way or the highway. Meanwhile, there are whispers that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni may have had a rift over It Ends With Us, with TikTokers and sleuths speculating about the tension. An exclusive piece from In Touch delves into Ryan's growing influence in Hollywood, noting that with his multimedia marketing company, he now has the power to demand complete control over movie campaigns. He's very proud of the work his company does, and it's clear that when it comes to promoting a film, Ryan's approach is all about bringing his team full force to the table. But this also means sidelining studio marketing executives and publicists with decades of experience, something Ryan doesn't seem to care about. Once he takes control, like he did with Deadpool and Wolverine this summer, it's his way or nothing. The article even compares him to Tom Cruise, who is known for taking as much control over his movie campaigns. It's clear that Ryan, like Tom, makes sure you know when he's 100% behind a project. The issue is, they both rarely get behind projects they're not starring in, and that's a bit unfortunate. Ultimately, it always seems to be about them. Ryan believes he's the shot caller, refusing to listen to any advice from others, so I'm sure when Jamie Heath suggested adjusting their approach during the red carpet or press tour, it was completely ignored. This entire article has nothing to do with It Ends With Us, though, but it highlights Ryan's clear desire for control in his marketing efforts. This whole situation is more about Deadpool and Wolverine, so it didn't stem from Justin's side. He was already getting criticism for how he handled not only the marketing of Deadpool and Wolverine, but also the fact that no one knew he was behind the marketing for It Ends With Us. On August 8th, fans began to speculate that Ryan Reynolds might be involved in the ongoing feud between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, probably because of his controlling nature. Blake Lively herself brought Ryan into the conversation when she publicly mentioned that her husband was heavily involved in the film's promotion. Ryan Reynolds took full control over the marketing, and as usual, he didn't want to hear any negative feedback about it. Blake bringing him into the conversation inadvertently shifted the spotlight onto him. But what Blake is clearly ignoring is that on August 9th, an article was published, which Leslie Sloan directly leaked to the Daily Mail. This was the article titled The Disturbing Truth Behind Why Blake Lively and Her It Ends With Us Co-stars Are Feuding with Justin Baldoni. This article is what got Stephanie Jones involved, and it's what Leslie Sloan planted about Justin. The text messages we saw revealed that Leslie was telling reporters they had gotten it all wrong about Blake. According to an insider, which I believe was Leslie, Justin Baldoni was described as chauvinistic and borderline abusive on the set of It Ends With Us. Tensions reportedly arose over his dismissive attitude toward Blake's input, especially during scenes that involved themes of abuse. That's odd because back in August, no one mentioned anything about sexual harassment or assault. Instead, it was claimed that Justin focused only on portraying the abusive male perspective and completely disregarded Blake's character's viewpoint. His approach was described as chauvinistic, creating a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere on set. The source even said Justin almost became the character himself, implying that he was acting in an abusive, unprofessional, and unapologetic manner. This doesn't line up with his long-winded apologies to Blake. Directing a film about domestic abuse without considering the woman's perspective is disturbing. Justin served as both director and producer, yet failed to recognize the roles. Blake and Colleen Hoover played as producers and writers. In fact, when Blake and Colleen requested some script rewrites, Justin took it very personally. What's also odd is that there's no mention of Colleen Hoover requesting rewrites, even though Colleen didn't write the screenplay. The entire screenplay was based on Christy Hall's adaptation of Colleen Hoover's book, yet now Leslie is trying to drag Colleen into the conversation, claiming she was the one pushing for the rewrites. Without Colleen's book, none of this would have been possible. Parts of the film had to be rewritten under Colleen's guidance, and those decisions were necessary for the film's success. Justin took those script changes very personally, even though they weren't intended as criticisms. Do you see any text messages between Justin and anyone talking about Colleen, or was Colleen quietly pulling the strings in the background? Is Blake trying to place the blame on Colleen for the changes? It was said that things only got worse once Justin began to feel like the women were ganging up on him. His behavior reportedly worsened as a result, and he became even less empathetic. Now, he's singing their praises, likely out of fear that they'll call him out. Knowing it's coming, he might even try to blame his actions on being a method actor, which is strange. They accused him of being chauvinistic and not considering the female perspective, but the script had to be rewritten for it to succeed. Doesn't that sound like something Ryan Reynolds would say? Like, if he's not the one writing it, the film will fail. So, there's nothing here about sexual harassment or a hostile work environment. What they're really saying is that Colleen forced them to make these rewrites for the film to work, which feels like projection on their part. This all ties into a piece published on August 9th by the Daily Mail. If Blake wants to argue that everything shifted on that date, this was it. On that day, the Daily Mail, TMZ, and several other outlets published pieces about Justin's behavior on set. Throughout this time, whenever Justin had the chance to speak about Blake, he never portrayed her as the bad guy. He never disparaged her, even when discussing complex personalities. He said, "I'm a best idea wins person. I've been to a fault at times, to the point where people sometimes wonder if I know what I'm doing, or if I have a point of view, because I'm so willing to have my vision changed. I don't believe that inspiration or creativity comes from just one person." It was a balancing act for him to avoid having his voice drowned out entirely. He also mentioned, "You don't have to listen to everybody." That didn't always happen, but he admitted there were moments when he got out of the way too much. He said, "The last thing I wanted to do was have a male gaze overshadow these very important moments that needed to be told truthfully to represent all the women who experience them every day." He credited Blake Lively for her incredible contribution to the film, saying you couldn't possibly sum up her influence in just one sentence. Her energy and imprint were all over the movie, and she made it so much better. He also praised Ryan Reynolds, calling him a creative genius, noting that Ryan's gift was bringing levity to the project. Ryan added that Blake also brought a similar gift, making their collaboration even more special. He even expressed that he would be happy to work with them again if they'd have him. He could have said many negative things about them, but chose to be diplomatic and praised them for their help, which again tells me that had this all been true, he would have approached it very differently. If they hadn't done this, none of this story would have ever come out. We wouldn't have known how difficult or challenging it was for him. And yet, he was willing to cover for her to keep the film successful. So why would he say all of these things publicly, then privately try to destroy her? Blake cannot get out of her own way. She wants to blame Jed Wallace without any proof that he did anything wrong. She wants to make this poor man from Texas take the fall, just to deal with her own ego because she got bad press. She's so out of touch with reality. Let me read something to you. The relevant means of the parties. Mr. Wallace asserts that he perceives a financial disparity between himself and Miss Lively, but even if there is a genuine and substantiated disparity, like a pro-se individual plaintiff suing a corporation, it's irrelevant unless there's proof that litigating in the forum would impose undue hardship. The Wallace party has provided nothing but vague assertions about his perceptions. They've offered no evidence to support claims of limited means, and the allegations in his affidavit are insufficient to move the needle on this factor. She literally dismisses his point, saying that he's just assuming they're wealthier and smarter than he is. She has no sympathy for the fact that he has health issues, which would make it harder for him to travel. She wants him to somehow know that the reason he was helping was because she accused them of sexual harassment, something he had no idea about. He was supposed to know that retaliation law existed and that what he was doing was unlawful, even though no one told him that. They are terrified of his actual declaration, where he clearly stated that no one informed him of the claims. He was never brought up to speed on any of it, so he was involved in nothing. Her response to this is that he should have known. But how could he have known if no one told him, right? She cannot get past the fact that nothing like this actually happened, and she has no case against Mr. Wallace. The only person feeding content to the public was Blake Lively. She tried to accuse him of being abusive in that article published by the Daily Mail through her publicist, Leslie Sloan. And it was that article that truly set everything in motion. Yet now, she's trying to shift the blame for Leslie's actions onto Baldoni. Let's not forget that in July, her husband was running around Hollywood, calling Mr. Baldoni a sexual predator. Blake Lively seems to believe she can blame all of this on Jed, yet she has absolutely no evidence to prove that Jed did any of it. Can you imagine claiming that this man in Texas was casting her in a false light, attacking her marketing decisions, moral character, private life, and family, while starting threads of theories and seeding content on social media platforms like Reddit? He says he did nothing, so how can he argue that their actions weren't extreme and outrageous? Well, because he said he didn't do any of those things. All of this media cycle led to online vitriol and, apparently, violence directed at Miss Lively. But what violence was she really subjected to? What about the real domestic violence victims who weren't heard or considered by her? I would read you the full motion to dismiss response, but what I gathered from it is that Blake has absolutely no evidence against Jed Wallace. Nothing at all. All she has are text messages between people who mention his name, along with communications from him through relayed messages where he says, "We're killing it on Reddit." That's it. There's no hard proof for any of her claims. She talks about proposals and suggestions of what could have been done if necessary, but even he confirmed it wasn't necessary and was never put into action. He made it clear that there was an organic backlash stemming from the way she marketed the film, not focusing on domestic violence and instead promoting her own brand. His suggestion was to let it all play out naturally, but she won't acknowledge his declaration, so she just keeps repeating the same unproven claims. The truth is, on August 9th, the day she claims Mr. Wallace turned the internet against her, it was actually Blake Lively who introduced her husband into the conversation. It was Blake Lively who said, "My husband wrote the rooftop scene." It was her publicist, Leslie Sloan, who planted stories in outlets like Daily Mail, TMZ, and New York Post. It was Justin's team that was simply on defense, trying to handle the massive smear campaign Blake and Ryan had started against him, largely because Ryan wanted full control over the film. And that's my perspective. What do you think? Are these the biggest gaps in her story, the most significant lies, or the biggest mistakes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.